Russian Fairy Tales. By the Will of the Pike. Once upon a time there lived an old man who had 3 sons, 2 of them clever young men, and the third Emilia a fool. The 2 elder brothers were always at work, while Emilia lay on the stove ledge all day long, with not a care in the world. One day the 2 brothers rode away to market, and their wives said, "Go and fetch some water, Emilia." And Emilia, lying on the stove ledge, replied, "Not I don't feel like it." "Go, Emilia, or your brothers will bring you no presents from the market." "All right then." Down climbed Emilia from the stove, put on his boots and kaftan, and, taking along 2 pails and an axe, went to the river. He cut a hole in the rice with his axe, scooped up 2 pailfuls of water, put down the pails, and himself bent down to look into the rice hole. He looked, and what did he see but a pike swimming in the water? Out shot his arm, and there was the pike in his hands. "We'll have some fine pike soup for dinner today," he exclaimed, delighted. But the pike suddenly spoke up in a human voice and said, "Let me go, Emilia, and I'll do you a good turn some day." Emilia only laughed. "What good turn could you do to me? No, I think I'll take you home and tell my sisters-in-law to make some soup. I do so love fish soup." But the pike fell to begging him again and said, "Do let me go, Emilia, and I'll do anything you wish." "All right," Emilia replied, "only first you must prove you aren't trying to fool me." "Tell me what you want, Emilia," said the pike. "I want my pails to go home all by themselves, without spilling a drop of water." "Very well, Emilia," the pike said. "And remember, whenever there is anything you want, you have only to say, 'By the will of the pike, do as I like,' and it will all be done at once." And Emilia, nothing loth, said, "By the will of the pike, do as I like. Off you go home, pails, by yourselves." And lo and behold, the pails turned and marched up the hill. And Emilia slipped the pike back into the ice hole, and himself walked after them. On went the pails along the village street, with Emilia behind them, laughing to himself, and the villagers stood round and marveled. The pails marched straight into Emilia's hut and jumped up on the bench, and Emilia climbed up onto the stove ledge again. A long time passed by, and a little time, and his sisters-in-law said to Emilia, "Why are you lying there, Emilia? Go and chop up some wood." "Not I don't feel like it," Emilia said. "If you don't do as we say, your brothers will bring you no presents from the market." Emilia was loath to leave the stove ledge. He remembered the pike and said half under his breath, "By the will of the pike, do as I like. Go and chop some wood, axe, and you would come inside the house and jump into the stove." And lo, the axe leaped out from under the bench and into the yard, and began to chop the wood, and the logs filled into the hut all by themselves and jumped into the stove. A long time passed by, and a little time, and his sisters-in-law said to Emilia, "We have no more wood, Emilia. Go to the forest and cut some." And Emilia, lolling on the stove, replied, "And what are you there for?" "What do you mean by that, Emilia?" the women said. "Surely it's not our business to go to the forest for wood." "Well, I don't feel like doing it either," Emilia said. "Then you will get no presents," they told him. There was no help for it, so Emilia climbed down from the stove and put on his boots and kaftan. He took a length of rope and an axe, went out into the yard, and, getting into the sledge, cried, "Open the gate, women!" And his sisters-in-law said to him, "What are you doing at the sledge, fool? You haven't harnessed the horse yet." "I can do without the horse," Emilia replied. His sisters-in-law opened the gate, and Emilia said half under his breath, "By the will of a pike, do as I like. Off you go to the forest sledge." And, lo and behold, the sledge whisked out through the gate so quickly that one could scarcely have caught up with it even on horseback. Now the way to the forest lay through a town, and the sledge knocked down and crushed many people. The townsfolk cried, "Hold him, catch him!" But Emilia paid no heed and only urged on the sledge on to get the faster. The sledge sped into the forest, and he stopped it and said, "By the will of a pike, do as I like. Cut some dry wood axe, and you, faggots, climb into the sledge one by one and bind yourselves together." And, lo and behold, the axe began to hack and split the dry wood, and the faggots dropped into the sledge one by one and bound themselves together. Emilia then ordered the axe to cut him a heavy cudgel. He climbed up on top of the log of wood and cried, "By the will of a pike, do as I like. Off you go home, sledge." And the sledge drove off very fast indeed. Emilia again passed through the town where he had knocked down so many people, and there were they and their friends all ready and waiting for him. They seized him, pulled him out of the sledge, and began to curse and to beat him. Seeing that he was in a bad plight, Emilia said half under his breath, "By the will of a pike, do as I like. Come, cudgel, give him a good thrashing." And the cudgel sprang up and laid to right and left. The townsfolk took to their heels, and Emilia went home and climbed up on the stove again. A long time passed by, and a little time, and the Tsar heard of Emilia's doing, and sent one of his officers to find him and bring him to the palace. The officer came to Emilia's village and into his hut and asked, "Are you Emilia the fool?" And Emilia replied from the stove ledge, "What if I am? Dress quickly, and I shall take you to the Tsar's palace." "I am all right where I am," Emilia said. The officer flew into a temper and struck Emilia in the face. And Emilia said half under his breath, "By the will of a pike, do as I like. Come, cudgel, give him a good thrashing." And out of the cudgel jumped and beat the officer, so that it was all he could do to drag himself back to the palace. The Tsar was much surprised to learn that his officer had not been able to get the better of Emilia and get sent for the greatest of his nobles. "Go fetch Emilia and bring him to my palace, or I'll have your head chopped off," he said. The great noble bought a store of raisins and prunes and honey cakes. And then he came to the self-same village and into the self-same hut, and asked Emilia's sisters-in-law what it was Emilia liked best. "Emilia likes to be spoken to kindly," they said. "He will do anything you want, if only you are gentle with him and promise him a red kaftan for a present." The great noble then gave Emilia the raisins, prunes, and honey cakes he had brought, and said, "You've lain on the stove ledge long enough, Emilia. Come with me to the Tsar's palace." "I am all right where I am," Emilia replied. "Ah, Emilia, the Tsar will feast you on sweetmeats and wines. Do let us go to the palace." "Not I. I don't feel like it," Emilia replied. "But Emilia, the Tsar will give you a fine red kaftan for present, and a cap and a pair of boots." Emilia thought this over. "Very well, I shall do as you ask," said he. "Only you must go on alone, and I shall follow by and by." The noble rode away, and Emilia lay on the stove a while longer and then said, "By the will of a pike, do as I like. Off you go to the Tsar's palace, stove." And lo, The hut began to creak and the roof to shake. A wall crashed down, and off the stove whipped all by itself into the street and down the road and made straight for the Tsar's palace. The Tsar looked out of the window and marveled. "What is that?" he asked, and the great noble replied, "That is Emilia riding on his stove to your palace." The Tsar stepped out on his porch. "I have had many complaints about you, Emilia," he said. "It seems you have knocked down many people." "Well, why did we get in the way of my sledge?" said Emilia. Now the Tsar's daughter, Tsarevna Maria, was looking out of the palace window just then. And when Emilia saw her, he said half under his breath, "By the will of the Pike, do as I like. Let the Tsar's daughter fall in love with me." And he added, "Off you go home, stove." The stove turned and off it made straight for Emilia's village. It whisked into the hut and went back to its place, and Emilia lay on the stove ledge as before. Meanwhile, there were tears and wails in the palace. Tsarevna Maria was crying her eyes out for Emilia. She told her father she could not live without him and begged him to let her marry him. The Tsar was much troubled, and he said to the great noble, "Go and bring Emilia here, dead or alive. Do not fail, or I'll have your head chopped off." The great noble bought many kinds of dainties and sweet wines and set off for Emilia's village again. He came into the self-same hut and began to feast Emilia royally. Emilia had his fill of the good food and the wine, and he sat swimming, lay down and fell asleep, and the noble put him asleep as he was into his carriage and rode off with him to the Tsar's palace. The Tsar at once ordered a large barrel bound with iron hoops to be brought in. Emilia and Tsarevna Maria were placed in it, and the barrel was dead, sealed and cast in the sea. A long time passed by, and a little time, and Emilia woke. He looked, and it was dark all around, and the walls seemed to press in on him. "Where am I?" he asked, and Tsarevna Maria replied, "Sad and weary is our love, Emilia, my love. They have put us in a barrel, dead and sealed it, and cast in the blue sea." "And who are you?" Emilia asked again. "I am Tsarevna Maria," came the reply. Said Emilia, "By the will of the Pike, do as I like. Come, wild winds, cast the barrel on to the dry shore, and let it rest on the yellow sand." And lo and behold, the wild winds began to blow. The sea was furrowed by waves, and the barrel was cast on to the dry shore, and came to rest on the yellow sand. Out stepped Emilia and Tsarevna Maria, and Tsarevna Maria said, "Where are we going to live, Emilia, my love? Do build us a hut or some kind." "Not I don't feel like it," Emilia replied. But she begged and begged, and at last he said, "By the will of the Pike, do as I like. Let a palace of stone with a roof of gold be built." And no sooner were the words out of his mouth that a stone palace with a roof of gold rose up before them. Round it there spread a green garden, where flowers bloomed and birds sang. Tsarevna Maria and Emilia came into the palace and sat down by the window. Said Tsarevna Maria, "Oh, Emilia, couldn't you become tall and handsome?" And Emilia did not think long before he said, "By the will of a Pike, do as I like. I want to become tall and handsome." And lo, Emilia turned into a youth as fair as the sky at dawn, the handsomest youth that ever was born. Now it was just about then that the Tsar went hunting, and he saw a palace where one had never been seen before. "What doll has dared to build a palace on my land?" he said. and he sent his messengers to learn who the culprit was. The Tsar's managers ran to the palace, stood under the window and called to Yemelya, asking him to tell them who he was. "Tell the Tsar to come and visit me, and he shall hear from my lips who I am," Yemelya replied. The Tsar did as Yemelya bade, and Yemelya met him at the palace gate, led him into the palace, seated him at his table, and feasted him royally. The Tsar ate and drank and marveled. "Who are you, my good fellow?" he asked at last. "Do you remember Yemelya the fool, who came to visit you on top of a stove?" Yemelya said. "Do you remember how you had him put in a tarot barrel together with your daughter Tsarevna Maria and cast in the sea? Well, I am that same Yemelya. If I choose, I can set fire to your whole tsardom and level it with the ground." The Tsar was very frightened and begged Yemelya to forgive him. "You can have my daughter in marriage, and you can have my tsardom too. Only spare me, Yemelya," said he. Then such a grand feast was held as the world had never seen. Yemelya married Tsarevna Maria and began to rule the realm, and they both lived happily ever after. And this is my faithful tale's end, while he who listened is my own true friend.